Wow. Wow. Okay. Testing. 1, 2. Testing. Testing.
Testing, testing.
Testing. That sounds. Did you open your mouth? Yes.
It's on the delay, so I did it.
The little things in life are easy to take for granted, like getting away from the kids for grown-up time.
Good evening, and welcome to the second of 3 budget forums for St. Louis Public Schools. My name is Angie Banks. I'm the Chief Financial Officer, and our Superintendent, Dr. Kelvin Adams, will be joining us a little later for the live Q&A segment. I'll present the finance presentation in its entirety, and then we will go to the chat for questions. Ryan L. Jackson will be moderating. This is a condensed version of the fiscal year 2022 preliminary budget that was presented to the Board of Education on March 9th at the board meeting. We'll begin with the revenue assumptions for fiscal year 2022, starting with the general operating budget. There is some uncertainty with the revenue in GOB due to legislative and ongoing pandemic risk. However, we have projected revenues for the general operating budget to be $287 million. Regarding local revenue, we anticipate the assessed valuations will increase due to the hot real estate market that we're experiencing. Therefore, property taxes we project will be up 0.5%. However, sales taxes will be down 3%, as they are currently in the current year. Building sales also will be up 25%. For our state revenue, our state aid will be down 33%, and that's our basic formula and classroom trust, but transportation and the High Need Fund and other state GOB revenues will be flat. Our federal revenues, including E-rate, Medicaid, and military reimbursements, will also be flat for the year as compared to the current year. We have budgeted about 12 local grants to the tune of about $9.8 million. The majority of those local grants fall under the 3 categories listed below: St. Louis Public Schools Foundation, Parsons Blewett, and what we call our Simon Fund. The 12 funds that we have budgeted really represent the, well, scratch that. The grants within these categories of local grants represent about 90% of the 9.8 million. However, there are some smaller local grants that are included in the budget as well. We have budgeted $73.8 million under state and federal grants. Our entitlement grants, including all of our title funds, special education, Perkins, and a few more, we don't have our allocations for. However, we're just using estimates. A few state and federal category of grants to note include food service. We are anticipating that we will be returning to the National School Lunch Program in fiscal year 2022, unlike the summer feeding program that we've been under since the pandemic. That should have an increase in revenues for food service. We also know that we have budgeted $20 million of the $46 million allocation of the SR2 funds. Regarding debt service, we have budgeted $30.1 million, consistent with the anticipated increase in property taxes. Moving on to our fiscal year 2022 expenditures, we know that payroll is really the largest part of the expenditure budget. But these initiatives that I've noted here really are related to the consolidation upgrade plans. So we have increased 27 elementary reading teachers for about $1.5 million, 20 virtual K-8 program staff for about $1 million, and 71 support services staff for about $2.6 million, as listed. We do anticipate there will be some increased cost for extra service expenses based on the literacy PD. There has been a central office restructuring that will result in about 13 positions that are being reduced for a savings of about $1.1 million. The base of the fiscal year 2022 payroll expenditures includes a 3% increase for all full-time staff that will cost about $5.3 million. We also increased the minimum wage to $13 per hour in January of 2021. That will be increased to $14 in January of 22 and $15 in January of 23. Since the general operating budget is the largest part of the budget, it also is the largest part of payroll. And the basis of GOB staffing is the school staffing model. It's based on the DESE pupil-teacher ratio, and we use projected enrollment. On this slide, you will see the ratios used for the different grade levels. Now, DESE has a range, a lower range and a higher range. The range that you see on this slide really represents somewhere in the middle, which is typically where we staff. So for example, for preschoolers, there could be up to 20 preschoolers per classroom. But for pre-K, the classroom also includes an aide. This represents the general operating school staffing that is outlined in the staffing guide. The various teachers, types of teachers, aides, administrative positions, and student support positions. And this really is for all grade levels, although there are differences based on the PTRs, or pupil-teacher ratios. Some of the non-payroll related initiatives in the general operating budget include an increase of 15% to the school discretionary budgets. That will cost about $450,000. You'll see listed the levels, the grade level allocations per student. And these are the 15% increased rates. So for pre-kindergarten, the discretionary budget would be allocated at $115 per preschool student, and so on. Alternative and specialty schools aren't allocated on a per pupil basis, but have a fixed amount. Those fixed amounts have also been increased by 15%. And this year we're doing things a little bit different due to the pandemic and the consolidation. We are going to pre-populate those discretionary budgets where we typically will send out spreadsheets for principals to determine exactly where they want those funds to be allocated. These are the general areas that most schools are using heavily. So we're going to pre-populate these areas: meeting expenses, supplies, awards and incentives, technology, and technology supplies. The principals will actually have an opportunity to transfer these funds to other areas to meet their needs and be consistent with their school plans. Here's just an example of a school's discretionary budget allocation. So if we had an elementary school that had 50 preschoolers and 300 K-5 elementary students, their allocation would be the $5,750 plus the $43,125 for a total of $48,875, and they would be allocated per the previous slide in those various categories. Other GOB initiatives include an increase to nursing supplies budget, $60,000, a new textbook adoption in reading and literacy, $500,000, some facility updates, $2 million, the senior work experience, where seniors have an opportunity to receive paid internships, $1 million, some additional advanced and virtual course options in the high schools, and some financial system updates, $1 million. As mentioned, the local grants, we've budgeted $9.8 million. And those three major categories of grants, St. Louis Public Schools Foundation, there's actually $7.7 million budgeted, and those grants include early childhood, student technology, career readiness, and various student support initiatives. The $1 million, nearly $1 million in the Parsons category has several teacher and tuition-focused grants. The Simon Endowment at $500,000 supports technology and equipment for our special education students, primarily at Nottingham, Gateway Michael, and Madison. I like to note that these local grants don't have per pupil allocations like we talked about for the general operating budget, because most of these grants have a specific focus, whether it's for a particular school, it might have a focus like gifted or reading, it might require some type of an application in order to be received at a school. And for these and other reasons, you're just not going to see an equal per pupil expenditure when you're looking at reports. There's just no way that that's going to happen just based on the way that the funds are received. The state and federal grants will primarily be a continuation of staffing and programming from the current year, with the addition of the 27 elementary school teachers at $1.5 million and 2 family community specialists at about $75,000. We do know, again, that the SR2 funds are budgeted at $20 million for fiscal year 2022, and they'll be used primarily for various personal protective equipment, new and damaged equipment replacements, and also to offset any general operating budget deficits. And also with these funds, there's not a per pupil allocation across the board. And thus that also, you're going to see those differences in the schools. The debt service fund balance has been declining for the past several years. However, for fiscal year 2022, we see somewhat of a reversal where our principal and interest payments will decline about 20% for savings of about $6 million. And that's just basically the way that our debt is structured. So really going forward, we should see some nice declines. This really puts us in a good place to consider a no tax increase bond issue, likely to the tune of $150 to $200 million. If you think about Proposition S, that's where we do some nice capital improvements at the buildings. So that's an opportunity that's before us. In addition, we also have a couple of bonds that are available to be refunded or refinanced to a lower interest rate. That could also save the district about $400,000 in the next couple of years. So here are the preliminary fiscal year 2022 revenues and expenditures by category as compared to the fiscal year 21 projections and the fiscal year 2020 actuals. So a couple of highlights. You'll note that the general operating revenues and expenditures are both $287 million for fiscal year 2022. We know that next year we anticipate that there would have been a deficit or higher expenditures than revenues in the general operating budget. So we've opted to offset some of those costs in the SR2 funds to make sure that the general operating budget doesn't fall into a deficit. So those ESSER funds, those fall under state and federal. So knowing that $20 million is budgeted for fiscal year 2022, you can see the big increase from the current year. Also to note, in fiscal year 21, the current year, this is the last year of the SIG, or the School Improvement Grant funding. Also in fiscal year 2022, you'll see a big increase in the food service, both revenue and budget categories. Again, that's because we're assuming that we're going back to the National School Lunch Program, whereas in fiscal year 21, you see the lower numbers and the deficit while we're under the summer feeding program. Of course, when we're in a deficit situation, once the food service fund balance is depleted, the general operating budget would have to pick up any of those deficits. And unfortunately, the SR2 funds cannot pick up the general operating, the food service deficit. So you'll note that in total, the fiscal year 2022 revenues, we project at $400.7 million for a 7% increase as compared to the current year and a $26.2 million increase. The expenditures for fiscal year 2022, we project at $395.5 million, which is a 6.4% increase from the current year and a $23.7 million increase. Here is a picture of our projected revenues by source for fiscal year 2022. You'll note that the local revenues represent 77%, and more specifically, of those local revenues, 82% are from property taxes. Federal revenues come in at a far distant at 18%, followed by the state at 4%, and county revenues at 1%. Here are your fiscal year 2022 expenditures by category. Of course, as you would expect, your salaries and benefits represent the largest percent at 66%. The next largest area is purchase services at 20%. Purchase services includes all contracted services, large and small, most of which are on the operational side of the house versus the academic. Rounding out the expenditures include the supplies and materials at 6%, our debt at 6%, and our capital outlay at 2%. That really concludes the presentation. So we will now move on to the live Q&A segment. Mr. Jackson.
Thank you, Ms. Banks for that presentation. We are awaiting questions to arrive in the queue. Right now, we do not have any, but our audience has been prompted.
Well, Dr. Adams, would you like to have some closing words?
First of all, thank you for the audience that is with us tonight. We are going to do this again on Thursday night, and we will also open up the opportunity for persons to leave questions online. But we want to thank you for giving us your time tonight. For those persons who did participate, this presentation will be shown again on our website, and we want to thank the public for any questions or concerns they may have relative to the budget before the budget is recommended to the board at the April 13th board meeting. Thank you very much and have a good evening.